Looks like it's about time to start. We're in Revelation chapter 7. And we're in the second part of the chapter. The first part of the chapter was the sealing of the 144,000. And the whole, again, the book of Revelation is symbolic. There are some groups that actually take the 144,000 as literal, that that's all that's going to be in heaven. In fact, if you've ever known a person that went to the Jehovah's Witnesses, they actually believe that that is all that's ever going to be in heaven is 144,000. And once a year, they take what we call the Lord's Supper. But not everybody gets to take it. Only the 144,000 that are still down here get to take it. I never got a good answer to how you figure out that you're the part of the 144,000. But it was never meant to be literal anyway to start with. 144,000 is just a symbol for the complete sealing and protection under the picture of Israel, 12,000 from each of the tribes, but it's not the normal tribes. It's a special revelation listing of tribes. But it's before the angels that were holding back the wind, before any harm could come, God wanted his people to know, I'm going to seal you. I'm going to put my name on your head, your mind. Doesn't mean that they're not going to go through tribulation, but it does mean that God owns you. You're his people. Yes, sir.
Did you hear about the AD 70 stuff that was going on several years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The only thing I really know too much about it is basically all the people that's going to be saved is already saved. So my first question is, if I can't be saved, why am I going to church?
One of many of those questions. In 1 Corinthians 11, we take the Lord's Supper, proclaiming the Lord's death until he comes. Well, if he already came in AD 70, why are we still taking the Lord's Supper?
That's the first thing that popped in my mind. Okay, so if I can't be saved, I'm wasting my time going to church.
Yeah, but that's AD 70 is false teaching.
I know. Yeah, but there was a member of the Church of Christ that was spreading that.
I know. There's several, actually. It's a sad thing. AD 70 is a significant event in the prophecy of Christ and in judgments, but it's not the resurrection from the dead. So the second half of Revelation chapter 9 looks at the same group of people, but from a different vantage point. And verse 9 here says, after these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes, with palm branches in their hands. And they cry out with a loud voice, saying, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. So now, instead of having 144,000, 12,000 from each of the tribes of Israel, this number you cannot count. It's innumerable. So many people, and not just from the tribes of Israel. This is universal. Every nation, tribes, people, tongue. So this is the saved in the sense that the Church of Christ, the kingdom of the Lord, is a multinational group of saved people. And they are standing before the throne and the Lamb, and they're wearing white robes. Again, the idea of purity and the righteous deeds that Christians do. Palm branches in their hand, reminiscent of the feast that Israel had, and they would celebrate with the palm branches the salvation of God. In fact, that's what they sing in verse 10. Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. So John is telling us, here's the group of the saved. You can't number them. But God also has them right there in the throne room of the universe with them. Okay, I think we covered all that. Verse 11 says, all the angels stood around the throne, and the elders and the four living creatures fell down on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom, thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. When one of the elders answered, saying to me, who are these arrayed in white robes, and where did they come from? And I said to him, sir, you know. So the worship breaks out again in heaven. The angels, the living creatures, and the people all before the throne, the innumerable host of them, and they worship God. Blessing, glory, wisdom, thanksgiving, honor, power, and might. There's a sevenfold blessing again. And if you think about those, it describes the nature of God. He's in total control. You're not going to outsmart him. You're not going to overpower him. He is worthy of worship. He is our God forever and ever. He's the eternal one. Worship to him makes perfect sense. He always has been, always will be. Caesars come and go. God does not. And in this worship scene, that's another thing they're calling out to us here. But the question that one of the elders asked him, saying, who are these that are wearing the white robes and have the palm branches? Where did they come from? And so John says, you know. And then he answers in verse 14, these are the ones who come out of the great tribulation and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. This, if you still have your little timeline sheet, the most popular doctrine taught today is pre-trib, premillennialism. Pre-trib means before the tribulation. These people believe that Jesus is going to come back and rapture the church so that the church doesn't have to go through the tribulation. Oops. They missed the picture that John just gave us here in chapter 7. It's not that they got taken out before the tribulation. They're coming out of the great tribulation. So whatever else I know that pre-trib is not true. They're coming out through the tribulation. Most want to teach that Christians are going to avoid the tribulation, that you'll get raptured. And that's almost always what they're saying is, oh, well, you won't have to worry about the earthquakes and the locusts and the stars falling and the sun going black and all the weird stuff that's going to happen. Jesus is going to come back and whoop, take you away before any of that stuff happens. But that's not what the book said. It said that the group of saved people that you couldn't count came out of the tribulation. And John's telling them, look, what happens to you when you go through this meat grinder? Well, you get a white robe, you get a palm branch, you get to sing salvation belongs to God, and you're in his presence. And so it's a picture of victory, not of missing the tribulation, but of actually going through it. And then he describes, they shall neither hunger anymore, nor thirst anymore. The sun shall not strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them and lead them to living fountains of waters. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. How many sermons have you heard that that's heaven? I've heard bunches. It is heaven, isn't it, in a sense? God's going to wipe away every tear. You're never going to be thirsty. But he's not talking about, is that literal? No. Jesus is going to lead into living fountains of waters. That's spiritual. They're not going to hunger anymore or thirst anymore, but he's not talking about physical food or drink. He's talking about spiritually, they are satisfied. The sun's not going to strike them anymore or any heat. No pain. No trouble. The Lamb who's in the midst of the throne will shepherd them and lead them. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Now, if you're a Christian, doesn't that sound awesome? Could you face tomorrow knowing that this is how God treats his people? Yeah, I could. I can make it. Even if it means I'm going to have to shed some tears down here. Even if it means down here I may have to face the heat. But I know that God has got my back. He's with his people. Any comments or questions about 7 before we get to 8? If you remember, we paused on seal number 7. Now it's time to open number 7 seal. When you opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half hour. And I saw 7 angels who stand before God. And to them were given 7 trumpets. Then another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. So if you remember when we started the book, there was a scroll that God had in his right hand that had 7 seals on it. And every one got peeled off, and it revealed what was going to come. And you get to number 7. What happens under number 7? And counterintuitively, it's a half hour of silence. The calm before the storm. Just a short time. Then he sees 7 angels who stand before God, and they're given 7 trumpets. And then another angel comes with a censer to put incense on the altar. Now, under the old tabernacle, the altar of incense was just outside the curtain of the most holy place where the mercy seat was at. And it was close. And here we're told that this is before the throne of God. And this angel puts the incense and the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar. When we get to the other side, we'll figure out how powerful prayer was. Because here we're being told your prayers are going to the throne room of the universe, and it is going up and ascending before God. Don't give up praying. Make sure you remember how powerful they are. The smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. And the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. And there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. So the incense smoke is going up, the prayers of the saints are going up. And he took the same censer and he scooped some fire out and he poured it on the earth. Judgment time has come. The prayers of the saints demand it. They've been asking God, when are you going to pay him back? And so he scoops out the fire and casts it down to the earth. Noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. We're not told the significance of that, except all of those tell you that he has shaken their world. If you've ever been out with lightning and thunder, you know how awesome that is. And there were noises and an earthquake. A lot of earthquakes in the book of Revelation. A lot of stuff getting moved around. But it's not the earthquakes that we have. He's shaking their world. He's judging the world. Then these 7 angels have their 7 trumpets and they get ready to sound. Trumpets, used to call the warning, used to get your attention. Trumpets are usually associated when judgments are about to take place or the enemy is about to fall. If you think about the walking around Jericho blowing the trumpets. Any comments or questions before we go a bit further? The first angel sounded, and hell and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. What's that remind you of?
Plagues in Egypt.
The plagues in Egypt. They also got a big hailstorm that killed, broke their trees, broke their stuff. And in fact, the Exodus 9, Moses stretched out his rod toward heaven. The Lord sent thunder and hail and fire darted to the ground, and the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with hail, so very heavy that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. The hail struck throughout the whole land of Egypt and all that was in the field, both man and beast, and the hail struck every herb of the field and broke every tree of the field. Now, that literally happened in the book of Exodus when God sent the 10 plagues against Egypt. But the book of Revelation is telling you this is not quite like that. It's like it in the sense that this is God's judgment. When hailstones start falling and fires coming down with it, that's a judgment. But what you notice is only 1/3 of the trees were burned up. Not all of them, just 1/3. All the grass was burned up. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? You get 1/3 of the trees, all the grass. Literally, if you're out in the hailstone with fireballs coming down mixed with blood, that would be a bad day, wouldn't it? You'd be thinking, what is going on? You're being judged. Here in Revelation, it's a picture. What does it mean? Most Bible students think this is a blow to agriculture. Bad hailstorm, ice storm, I guess we get ice storms out here that break the limbs off all the trees. But if you can imagine, hailstones big enough to do that, that'd be a bad day. Second trumpet blows. There's that word like again. Something like a great mountain burning with fire thrown into the sea. And 1/3 of the sea became blood. And 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died. And 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. It's like a great mountain. It's not a great mountain, but it's like it. Now, if you did throw a great mountain, if you took Everest and picked it up and cast it into the sea, what would happen?
Bad things.
Bad things would happen, wouldn't it? Tidal waves, tsunamis. If you set it on fire before you did it, that's a picture. The burning mountain gets thrown into the sea. Who's able to set a mountain on fire? I guess my sister was out in Colorado. Random smokers have done it because I've been out there and she'll drive me past where they burn off all the trees. But they didn't pick the mountain up, set it on fire, and then throw it into the sea. There's only one person able to do that type of stuff. It's God. This is another picture of judgment. Now, it could be that the burning mountain, back in 79 AD, Pompeii, you always hear about the people that got basically frozen in lava. So maybe he's talking about a burning mountain, a volcano that gets thrown into the sea. But Pompeii would have been on their mind. The sea turning to blood, again, is very reminiscent of the plagues that God used in Egypt when he turned the Nile to blood. That was a literal thing. This is a symbolic thing, a symbolic judgment. It's interesting what gets destroyed. A third of the sea creatures and a third of the ships, not half, not 2/3, just a third. The Bible's telling you this is a partial thing. It's only a third. Third of the ships were destroyed. Most Bible students think that this is a picture of Rome having trouble with the merchant marine. And it tends to be true that people who have a navy or vessels that can sail, a lot of your commerce, a lot of your economy. If you think back here when we had COVID and they couldn't unload the containers off ships, man, it didn't take very long to get into a lot of pain on that, was there? The supply chains were interrupted. If you take out a third of your supply chain, that would hurt. That's just a possible interpretation of that. Here's the third angel sounded. A great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. It fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. A great star. Literal? No. Because if a star actually hit Earth, we would all be French fried. It's over. Stars are way bigger than the Earth. But in the vision, in the picture, he saw this star that's like a torch. Somebody's setting something on fire again. But he sets on fire water. It contaminates a third of the rivers and the springs of water. Not all, not half, a third. Again, this is a partial judgment. The name of the star is wormwood, and that's a Greek word that means bitter. And so this is a judgment that's going to cause some pain, some bitterness. Many men died from the water because it was made bitter. So again, we think, is this literal? Was it a literal star falling to earth from heaven that only hits a third of the rivers and springs? That doesn't make any sense. If you got a star falling, it's going to take the whole planet out. So again, I think this is a picture of a partial judgment. He's giving him time. Wormwood is from the Greek word artemisia, plants that are bitter to the taste and stood for the judgment of God. Many people die because of the water. Normally water's a good thing, but not if you got wormwood in it. Then the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened, and a third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. Wait a second, I thought we already put the sun and the moon and the stars out back in chapter 6. Now they're back, and it's just a third. So whatever you're reading in chapter 6 that you thought was total and complete, no. Now they're back, and it's just a third. When we were studying about that, the sun being black like sackcloth, and the moon like blood, and the stars falling from the sky and stuff like that, we went through all the Old Testament and some of the New Testament passages that talked about that being a judgment of God against the nations, against Babylon, against Edom, against Jerusalem. So if these are symbolically representing the nations, or Rome, or Jerusalem, I guess, he's taken out a third of their leadership, a third of their stars, if you interpret it that way. But it's only a third. They're not totally gone now. It's just a third. A third of the day is dark, and a third of the moon. I'm so glad we're getting close to daylight savings time. It's brighter in the morning and brighter at night. It was already bad enough when it was dark. But can you imagine if your day got, 4 hours cut off, 3 hours cut off? Whatever the math works out to be. I think we talked about all that. Yeah, there's a typo. It's 8:13, not 12. Now, does your Bible say in verse 13, does it say he heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, or does it say he heard an eagle flying through the midst of the heaven?
Eagle.
It's eagle?
Mine says
Angel? You see there's a little footnote here in the New King James Version.
Mine's the New King James Version. Mine says angel.
Is there a footnote? Like a little letter?
Yeah, NU chest, NM chest, read angel, eagle.
Eagle. So that's why that is.
What is NU and M?
Those are names of manuscripts and kind of the abbreviations for them. If it's an angel, the standard of the Roman armies had eagles. Like, we've got the bald eagle as our symbol. So then that would be kind of spooky if there is an eagle flying through and saying, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth. Because it's kind of using their symbol against them. Of course, it could be an angel, because all over the book, everything's got an angel. The rivers, stars, the abyss, everything's got an angel. And this angel, or this eagle, is dramatically again saying, trouble's coming. 3 woes to the inhabitants of the earth because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the 3 angels who are about to sound. So he's telling them, you thought the first 4 trumpet blasts were bad, where a third of the stuff got taken out. Wait till you hear the next 3, and they're going to be bad. This is one of the patterns in the book of Revelations, like the 4 horses of the apocalypse, then 2 seals and 1. Same thing happens here with the trumpet. There's 4, then there's 2, then there's 1. It's going to get worse. Any comments or questions before we go a little bit further?
I got stalled out thinking about what they consider the star to be. And if I remember right, the first thought was that they thought it was something on fire, but I wonder how big they thought a star was. I mean, did anybody have any, it probably wasn't until recently we had an understanding that it's just a,
Yeah, I don't think they would, so saying it's like a torch
yeah,
was probably close to their proximity. Yes, ma'am?
So you got all these seeds of judgment, or partial judgment, or whatever. So, are they all kind of picture the same thing?
If you take those to be commerce and their navy and agriculture, that's just kind of the broad categories of problems. In principle, yeah, they're all saying you guys are being judged partially. So, but he's going to smite certain areas. Particularly here when we get into chapter 9, there's a very specific thing that he judges them on. And the locusts come out and all that stuff. So far as I understand. Here's where it gets weird. The fifth angel sounds, I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. And then it turns around and says, to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit. And smoke arose out of the pit like the smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Then out of the smoke, locusts came upon the earth, and to them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. This is interesting. So star falls, of course, it's not literal because we know stars are way bigger, but in the vision, zick, another ball of light drops. Turns out it's a he. He's given a key to the bottomless pit. Now, what does your Bible say there about the bottomless pit? The abyss? Or say something different in verse 1? What do you got, Rick?
That's supposed to happen this year. We're supposed to have an outbreak of locusts this year again, like we did years and years ago. Remember that? Locusts everywhere.
Been a while since I've seen a locust infestation, but you say it's coming this year?
Yeah, there's supposed every 7 years or something like that. They come up out of the ground and this and that and the other. And there's
Or are you talking about cicadas?
well, what's the difference?
That's a good question.
Anyway, they're supposed to come up out of the ground. And
Okay.
We're supposed to have outbreaks of.
I was like locusts are more grasshopper-like, but cicadas are they're kind of weird and creepy too. Actually, if
Oh,
you've
it's
ever
all
seen
the
them.
noisy things in the trees that we're talking about.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, we're supposed to have.
A bottomless pit. Does that mean it goes straight through the earth? Nah. It's a picture. When he opens the pit, smoke comes out of it like a great furnace. I don't know if you guys ever seen an iron smelter. Just thick, black smoke. And this is coughing out so much thick, black smoke that the sun and the air were darkened. So instead of the sun going a third dark, here this dark smoke is filling the atmosphere and blocking out the sun. And then, out of the smoke, locusts come on the earth. Whatever they may be, cicadas, I guess, or maybe I always thought more grasshopper-like. And then we're told that to them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. I remember when I was in college going to OCC, I dated a gal named Tina. Oh no, it's actually Tammy. And yeah, don't tell Cheryl. But she invited me to go down to meet her family in Dallas, Texas, and so we went down and we worshiped down there and met her folks and stuff. And I remember taking a shower to get ready to go to church that day, and I took a shower and I got out of the tub and I looked in the tub, and in the bottom of the tub by the drain was a scorpion. I was not used to having scorpions hanging around. He didn't sting me, he didn't get me, but I thought that was an omen. Stop dating her, go date Cheryl. So you tell Cheryl that the scorpion was the sign. But if that scorpion would have caught me, his stinger on that tail would have made it an interesting day. Would have been a little bit of pain. So the star falls from the heaven to the earth. He's called a he. If you remember when we were studying about Lucifer, but it wasn't Lucifer, if you remember. That's the Latin word for a shining star. So it's not the first time that the Bible talked about stars falling from heaven. In Isaiah 14, the star that fell was the king of Babylon. Here, this star that fell got a key to a bottomless pit that belches out black smoke, and he also gives power to these locusts. Sounds to me like Satan. He got the key to the bottomless pit. The furnace comes and darkens out the sky. The locusts are like scorpions. Unlike locusts, verse 4 says they were commanded not to harm the grass of the earth or any green thing or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were not given authority to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. Their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it strikes a man. In those days, men will seek death and will not find it, and they will desire to die, and death will flee from them. Weird locusts. Normal locusts eat grass and everything else. They'll strip trees. They'll strip anything that's green. And in the old Bible, of course, when the locust swarm came, it was just this massive swarm that would just kill all your crops. These locusts aren't your normal locusts. They are commanded not to harm any green thing or grass. They are allowed to only harm the humans that don't have God's seal on their forehead. So these are not just indiscriminately going out and stinging people. These are going out and stinging the people who aren't God's, the unbelievers, the persecutors. They don't kill these people. They just torment them for 5 months. So it's not forever, just temporary. And it's not good. Torment like a scorpion, you get pain, you get sick, it hurts, possibly leads to more problems. But these are just like a scorpion. They seek death but won't find it. So hearing that, what do you think that picture is drawing? Is this good or bad? This is bad, isn't it? Is it physical or spiritual? Not physical, are they? They're not eating grass. They're out bothering people who don't have God's name on their forehead. Smoke blocking out the sun, does that make you think What's that make you think of?
Big fire.
Big
You
fire?
ever seen a big old pile of tires burning?
That sends out a lot of black smoke, doesn't it? But I think this smoke here is not smoke. Carolyn, you were saying something? Or were you?
He said something, but I just gone out of my brain.
Good to know. Generally, people take this to be Satan. He's belching out the darkness from the bottomless pit. These locusts, if you buy into his lies and deceit and the darkness, the sting is the sting of sin. The sting is the sting of deception. I don't know why this is, but here lately on my Twitter feed, I get videotapes of various cities in the United States. And supposedly, these are people that are taking fentanyl or heroin on the street. And all the videos are of people basically, and I don't know how they do this, they're just stooped over and standing. They are so out of it. Some of them are actually laying on the ground. That's your life? That's what you're doing with your life, is to live on the street and be so out of it that you don't realize what's going on around you? Is there any moral decay going on today in America? Is there any darkness being belched out that's deceiving a lot of people and causing a lot of pain? It's a dumpster fire, isn't it?
That's what you used to say.
It is a dumpster fire. Suicides are up. Now here the Bible says they'd want to kill themselves, but they can't. That's just telling you that these are not it's not a physical issue. This is a spiritual issue. Now, I told you already I'm a preterist, but it means I believe the book has already been fulfilled back near the time of the people, but that doesn't mean that the principles do not still apply. The principles apply. Satan is still belching out false teaching, false living, idolatry, immorality. And just in my lifetime, how dark it has got. And it's going to get darker, I'm afraid, if Satan has his way. But the pain of it, it doesn't kill you, or may not kill you, but it just makes you miserable. Oops. Weird locusts. The shape of the locusts were like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were crowns, something like gold. Faces were like faces of men. They had hair like women's hair. And their teeth were like lions' teeth. And they had breastplates like breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was like the sound of chariots with many horses running into battle. And they had tails like scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men 5 months. Now, if you actually literally saw one of those, would that freak you out a little bit? Yes. When I was reading that, did an Apache attack helicopter come into your brain? Literally, some of the commentators I've read, they believe that these are Apache attack helicopters. I'm like, how in the world do you get that from a horse? And the way this is described. These are humans. And these are humans that have been distorted. Instead of the pleasing smile of a woman's hair, you would think that that'd be a better smile, but it's lion's teeth. And they got those stingers again, that they sting you and make you miserable. And they got breastplates of iron. They're strong. It's like horses. Stop and think about our country here for the last 30 years, 40 years. It's been a never-ending onslaught of going away from God. And the arguments that people have made was, well, you can't say that's wrong. This is America. People have the right to do whatever they want to. You can't say homosexual marriage is wrong. Love is love. In every argument anyone puts up, it's like they've got this thing all set up so that they're going to win at any cost. And there's a whole list of stuff that's just crazy now. And it stings people and it hurts people. It's sin. Like horses prepared for battle, crowns of gold on their head, faces like human faces, hair like women's hair, teeth like lions, breastplates of iron, sound of many chariots, stingers in their tail. This is moral and spiritual blindness, darkness that Satan is spewing out of that bottomless pit. And then we're told explicitly here, in verse 11, they had as a king over them the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, but in Greek he has the name of Apollyon. One woe is past. Behold, still two more woes are coming after these things. There's no doubt who this angel is, and the Hebrew is Abaddon, the Greek is Apollyon. They both mean the same thing, destroyer. And so that makes sense now why he would talk about the locust, because when locusts come, they destroy stuff. And you can understand how this angel that's over these destroyers that wants to punish men for 5 months, coming out of the smoke of the abyss, Apollyon, Abaddon, he don't care about anything except destroying. Still two more woes. This woe is woe. But there's two more. Any comments or questions before we go a bit further? Or should we stop here?
I wonder why they came up with 5 months.
One of the guys I read said that a lot of time if locusts come, it's like a 5-month thing. That's the kind of their cycle. But I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't seen the locust thing for years. I don't know if that's true or not.
Locusts usually don't last, well, what I call locusts, they only last like a week or two. But
Week or two.
what you're calling locusts, grasshoppers, they'll last all summer long.
They could go all summer long. Yeah, which would be about 5 months. Not Apache helicopters, pretty sure. Oh, you know what? We're out of time. Because God has got this 200 million army setting off at the Euphrates River. If you want to do a little research this week, go Google, how big is the U.S. military? How big is the Chinese military? How big is the Russian military? And you will be shocked that none of them are up to 200 million. And this is one of those things in the Bible, it's such a ginormous number. It can't be literal. But it means that God has got an army. He's holding them off at the Euphrates until the day, the hour, the month, and the year. And then boom. We'll quit there for tonight. Thanks for your comments.